The Providence Municipal Courtroom fell into an unusual hush that morning, the kind of silence that settles over a room when something extraordinary is about to happen. Inspector Quinn shuffled through his case files with furrowed brows, glancing twice at the name before him, as if double-checking that the words on the page weren't some elaborate clerical error. Judge Frank Caprio, seated at his familiar bench with that quiet authority he carries so naturally, noticed the hesitation immediately. His eyes, those warm brown eyes that have seen thousands of cases and thousands of human stories, flickered with curiosity. "What do we have here, Quinn?" Judge Caprio asked, his voice carrying that distinctive Rhode Island warmth that has made him beloved across the nation. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Quinn cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, the next case is..." "It's a bit unusual. Case number 2024, MV 7834. Defendant is listed as Marcus Jonathan Harrington, I. He paused, and the weight of the name hung in the air. "He's the governor of Rhode Island, Your Honor." A ripple of murmurs swept through the gallery. Spectators leaned forward in their seats. The regular attendees, the elderly woman who came every Tuesday, the law students taking notes, the curious citizens who wandered in all exchanged bewildered glances. Judge Caprio, however, remained perfectly still. His expression didn't change. Not a flicker of intimidation, not a hint of discomfort. Instead, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Well," he said softly, adjusting his glasses with the patience of a man who has learned that every person who enters his courtroom deserves the same dignity, regardless of title. "Call the case." The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and Governor Marcus Harrington strode in with the practiced confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. He was tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Behind him walked two aides and a high-powered attorney whose reputation preceded him, Vincent Carlucci, known in legal circles as the eraser for his ability to make problems disappear for powerful clients. But this wasn't a state Supreme Court. This wasn't a federal hearing. This was Frank Caprio's courtroom, a place where parking tickets and red light violations were transformed into profound examinations of the human condition, where mercy wasn't just dispensed, but taught, where the powerful and the powerless stood on equal ground before the bench. Governor Harrington approached the defendant's microphone, and for a moment, the air seemed to crackle with tension. Everyone expected deference. Everyone expected Judge Caprio to perhaps acknowledge the unusual circumstances, maybe offer some special accommodation. Instead, Caprio looked at the governor the same way he looked at the single mother struggling to pay a parking fine, the same way he looked at the elderly veteran who forgot to renew his registration. "Good morning, Governor," Judge Caprio said pleasantly. "You're here today regarding 3 red light camera violations and 1 failure to yield to a pedestrian in a crosswalk. The total fines amount to $650. He glanced at the paperwork. "I see these violations occurred over the past 4 months, all in the downtown Providence area." The governor's attorney immediately stepped forward. "Your Honor, if I may." Caprio raised a gentle hand. "Just a moment, counselor. I'd like to hear from the governor himself." He turned his attention back to Harrington, and his voice softened, that signature Caprio tone that invited honesty. "Talk to me, Governor." "What happened here?" The governor straightened his shoulders, and something shifted in his demeanor. The political polish, the camera-ready smile, it all hardened into something else. Something that looked unexpectedly like irritation. "Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying an edge that seemed out of place in this humble courtroom. "I want to be clear about something before we proceed. I'm the governor of this state. These cameras, these traffic enforcement systems, they operate under state jurisdiction. Under my jurisdiction." The courtroom went absolutely silent. Even the court reporter's fingers paused above her keyboard. Judge Caprio tilted his head slightly, studying the man before him with an expression that was neither hostile nor submissive. It was the look of a teacher patiently waiting for a student to finish making a mistake before gently correcting them. "Go on," Caprio said quietly. The governor, apparently interpreting the invitation as encouragement, continued with growing confidence. "With all due respect to this court, I believe there's a fundamental misunderstanding about jurisdiction and authority here. The executive branch, which I lead, has oversight over state operations, including municipal functions. These fines, this hearing, it's all." He gestured vaguely around the courtroom. "Well, frankly, it's beneath the office I hold. I have pressing matters of state to attend to. I'd like to propose that we dismiss these charges and allow me to return to the work the people of Rhode Island elected me to do." Attorney Carlucci nodded approvingly, clearly satisfied with his client's performance. The aides behind the governor stood taller. This was how power worked, after all. This was how the game was played. But they had never played in Frank Caprio's courtroom. Judge Caprio removed his glasses slowly, cleaned them with a small cloth, and placed them back on his face, a ritual anyone familiar with his court would recognize as the calm before a storm of wisdom. When he spoke, his voice was still gentle, but there was steel beneath the velvet. "Governor Harrington," he began, "I want to make sure I understand what you're telling me. You're suggesting that because of your elected position, the laws that govern every other citizen of Rhode Island don't apply to you?" The governor hesitated, sensing perhaps for the first time that he had miscalculated. "I'm saying that there are considerations." "Let me tell you something, Governor." Caprio leaned forward slightly, and decades of judicial wisdom seemed to concentrate in his gaze. "I've sat on this bench for over 40 years. I've seen people from every walk of life stand where you're standing. I've seen billionaires, and I've seen homeless veterans. I've seen politicians, and I've seen the people who clean their offices at night. And I'll tell you something I've learned in all those years." He paused, letting a moment breathe. "The law doesn't recognize titles. It doesn't care about poll numbers or political futures. In this courtroom, you're not a governor. You're a citizen. And every citizen, whether they wear a suit that costs $5,000 or clothes from a thrift store, is equal before this bench." The gallery erupted in barely suppressed whispers. Attorney Carlucci's confident expression faltered, and Governor Harrington, for the first time in perhaps many years, looked genuinely unsettled. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. Not even close. Judge Caprio settled back in his chair, and that familiar expression of patient curiosity returned to his face. It was the look that had drawn millions of viewers to his courtroom videos, the look of a man genuinely interested in the person before him, not just the case. "Now, Governor," he said, his tone warming again, "I want to set aside this jurisdictional discussion for a moment. I've learned over the years that behind every case, there's a story. Behind every violation, There's a human being with circumstances I don't yet understand." He folded his hands. "So let me ask you something. These violations, 3 red lights, 1 pedestrian crosswalk failure, they all happened in a 4-month window. That's a pattern. Tell me about those 4 months. What was happening in your life?" The governor's attorney immediately objected. "Your Honor, my client's personal life is not relevant to—" "Mr. Carlucci," Judge Caprio interrupted gently but firmly, "in my courtroom, I decide what's relevant. And I find that understanding a person's circumstances is always relevant to finding justice." He turned back to the governor. "Governor Harrington, I'm asking you not as a judge, but as a fellow human being. What was happening during those months?" Something remarkable happened, then something the cameras captured and the internet would later replay millions of times. Governor Marcus Harrington, i.e. the most powerful elected official in Rhode Island, the man who had moments ago declared himself above this court's authority, seemed to deflate. His shoulders dropped. His carefully constructed political facade began to crack, revealing something raw and human beneath. "My son," he said quietly, and his voice was entirely different now. "My son Thomas was dying." The courtroom fell into a profound silence. Even the ambient noise seemed to fade. No shuffling papers, no whispered conversations. Just the weight of those 4 words hanging in the air. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his expression softening into that compassionate gaze that had brought comfort to thousands. "Tell me about Thomas," he said gently. The governor swallowed hard. For a moment, he wasn't a politician. He wasn't an executive. He was a father, struggling with a grief that no title could protect him from. Tommy was. He's my youngest, 24 years old. He was diagnosed with leukemia 18 months ago. We thought his voice broke. We thought we had beaten it. The doctors were optimistic. And then, 4 months ago, it came back. Aggressive, terminal. He paused to collect himself, and Judge Caprio waited with infinite patience. Every one of those violations, the governor continued, happened when I was rushing to Rhode Island Hospital. When I got the calls. When I was told he had hours, then days, then hours again. The red lights, I didn't even see them. I was barely present in my own body. I was just a father trying to reach his son before it was too late. Attorney Carlucci, visibly moved, placed a hand on his client's shoulder. In the gallery, an elderly woman wiped her eyes with a tissue. Even Inspector Quinn, who had seen countless emotional moments in this courtroom, looked down at his shoes. Judge Caprio removed his glasses again, this time to dab at the corner of his own eyes. Governor, he said softly, I am so sorry. A parent losing a child there is no greater pain. I know that. He paused. How is Thomas now? The governor's face contorted with barely restrained emotion. He passed away 3 weeks ago. We buried him in the family plot in Warwick, next to his grandmother, who he adored. He took a shuddering breath. I should have contested these tickets sooner, but I couldn't. I couldn't deal with anything. I'm still not sure I can. The courtroom had transformed. What had begun as a confrontation between power and justice had become something far more profound, an exploration of shared humanity. The governor, who had strode in demanding special treatment, now stood before the bench as any grieving father would, broken, humble, desperately searching for understanding. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. I understand now why you were driving the way you were. Any father would have done the same. When our children need us, traffic laws become very small things. He paused, and his expression grew thoughtful. But I want to ask you something else, Governor. Something that troubles me. The governor looked up, uncertain. When you walked into my courtroom today, Caprio continued, you didn't tell me about Thomas. You didn't ask for compassion or understanding. Instead, you told me that you were above this court, that your position as governor meant the law didn't apply to you. His voice remained gentle, but carried an undeniable weight. Help me understand that. Help me understand why that was your first response. Governor Harrington closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, they were glistening. Because I'm tired, Your Honor. I'm tired of being seen as weak. I'm tired of the political opponents who are already circling, smelling blood in the water. My son died, and do you know what the first headline was? Governor's personal tragedy raises questions about fitness for office. Not sympathy. Not condolences. Questions. He shook his head bitterly. I've spent 30 years in politics. I've learned that showing vulnerability is showing weakness. So I came in here, ready to fight, ready to assert power, because that's the only language I know anymore. Judge Caprio listened intently, nodding slowly. So the arrogance that wasn't really arrogance, was it? That was armor. The governor's composure finally broke. A single tear escaped down his cheek, and he made no move to wipe it away. I don't know who I am without my son, Your Honor. I don't know who I am without the fight. All I know is that I ran those red lights because I was desperate, and I came in here swinging because I was terrified. Not of this court. Not of the fines. Terrified of falling apart in public. Terrified that if I showed anyone how much pain I'm in, I'd never be able to put myself back together. The attorney, Carlucci, who had built a career on aggressive legal maneuvering, stood beside his client in stunned silence. This wasn't what he had prepared for. No legal strategy could address this. In the gallery, someone was openly sobbing. The law students had abandoned their notes. Even the court officers, seasoned professionals who had seen everything, were visibly moved. Judge Caprio let the moment settle. He understood, better than most, that some truths need space to breathe. Governor, he finally said, I want to thank you for your honesty. What you just shared took more courage than any political speech you've ever given. But before the governor could respond, a voice came from the back of the courtroom, a voice that would change everything. Your Honor, may I approach? Everyone turned. A woman in her 50s, dressed simply in a worn cardigan and modest dress, was standing in the gallery. Her face was weathered but kind, marked by years of hard work and harder circumstances. She clutched a photograph in her trembling hands. Judge Caprio studied her with interest. And who might you be, ma'am? My name is Maria Santos, Your Honor, and I was the pedestrian. The crosswalk violation that was me. I was the one the governor almost hit. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Judge Caprio raised a hand to quiet the courtroom, his eyes fixed on the woman making her way down the aisle. There was something about her, a quiet dignity, a purposefulness that commanded attention without demanding it. She walked slowly, not from frailty, but as if carrying an invisible weight that required careful balance. "Mrs. Santos," Judge Caprio said warmly, "please come forward. Tell us why you're here today." Maria Santos approached the bench, standing just a few feet from Governor Harrington. The two looked at each other, the most powerful man in Rhode Island and a woman who clearly lived on the margins of society's attention. Neither spoke at first. "I wasn't going to come," Maria began, her accent revealing her immigrant roots. "When I got the notice about being a witness, I threw it away. I work 3 jobs, Your Honor. I clean offices at night. I work in a laundromat during the day. On weekends, I take care of elderly people in a nursing home. I don't have time for courts and lawyers, and—" She glanced at the governor. "Important people." Judge Caprio nodded understandingly. "So what changed your mind?" Maria looked down at the photograph in her hands. "Yesterday, I saw the news. I saw that the governor was going to fight these charges, that he was going to claim he was above the law because of who he is." She paused, and when she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but fire in her voice. "And I thought of my son, my Alejandro. He was 26 years old. He was killed by a driver who ran a red light 4 years ago. The driver was a wealthy businessman. He got a fine. That's it. A fine. And my Alejandro—" Her voice broke. "My Alejandro is in the ground." The courtroom was utterly still. Judge Caprio closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of yet another tragedy layered upon this case. "I came here because I was angry," Maria continued. "I came here because I wanted to tell the governor that laws matter. That pedestrians in crosswalks are real people with real families. That when you run a light, when you don't yield, you could be ending a life that matters, even if it doesn't make the newspapers." Governor Harrington was staring at her, his face pale. "Mrs. Santos," he started. But Maria held up her hand. "Please, let me finish. I came here angry. I sat in that gallery listening to you talk about your power, your position, how this court was beneath you. And I got angrier. I thought this is how it always is. The powerful walk away, and people like me bury our children." She took a shaky breath. "But then you talked about Thomas. You talked about your son. And I saw your face when you spoke about him. I saw the same pain I see in my mirror every morning." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I lost a son too, Governor. I know what it feels like when they put him in the ground. I know what it feels like to wake up and forget, just for a second, and then remember. I know how the world keeps spinning when yours has stopped." Judge Caprio watched this exchange with profound attention, his own eyes glistening. This was why he had done this job for over 40 years. These moments, these impossible, beautiful, heartbreaking human moments. "Mrs. Santos," he said gently, "what would you like to see happen here today?" Maria turned to face the bench, still clutching the photograph. "Your Honor, when I walked into this courtroom, I wanted punishment. I wanted this powerful man to know that his power couldn't protect him from consequences." She glanced at the governor, and something in her expression shifted. "But I've been listening, and I've been watching, and I think—" She hesitated. "I think he's already being punished. Life is already punishing him, same way it punished me." She turned fully to face Governor Harrington. "Governor, I don't forgive you for almost hitting me. You could have killed me, and then my daughter, my only remaining child, would have been left with nothing. No mother, no brother, nothing." Her voice was steady now. "But I understand desperation. I understand what grief does to a person. I understand not seeing the world around you because all you can see is the face of the person you're losing." Governor Harrington took a step toward her, his face a mask of emotion. "Mrs. Santos, I am so deeply sorry for what almost happened to you, for your son Alejandro, for everything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, pressing it to his eyes. "I came in here thinking I was above this, above all of you, and I was wrong. I was so wrong." He turned to Judge Caprio. "Your Honor, I withdraw any objection to this court's jurisdiction. I withdraw any claim to special treatment. I stand here as a citizen who broke the law, who put lives at risk, and who needs to be held accountable." Judge Caprio studied him carefully. "That's quite a change from 20 minutes ago, Governor." 20 minutes ago, I was afraid," the governor replied quietly. "I was hiding behind my title because I didn't know how to be just a person anymore. A grieving, broken person. Mrs. Santos reminded me that I'm not the only one suffering, that my pain doesn't give me the right to endanger others or to demand special treatment." Maria held out the photograph she had been clutching. "This is Alejandro," she said, showing it to the governor. "He was a nursing student. He wanted to take care of people. He was walking to his clinical rotation when the car hit him." The governor looked at the photograph for a long moment. A handsome young man with kind eyes and his mother's smile looked back at him. "He looks like a wonderful person," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He was," Maria said. "He was everything to me." Judge Caprio let the silence hold for a moment before speaking. "Mrs. Santos, I want to thank you for coming forward today. What you've shared, your loss, your pain, and ultimately, your compassion has transformed this hearing into something far more meaningful than a simple traffic case. You've reminded all of us what justice really means." He turned to the governor. "And Governor Harrington, I want to acknowledge the courage it took to drop your defenses and be honest with this court. That's not easy for anyone, let alone someone in your position." The judge paused, looking between the two of them, the powerful politician and the immigrant cleaning woman, both broken by loss, both standing vulnerable before his bench. "In all my years on this bench," Caprio said softly, "I've learned that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. It's about helping people become better versions of themselves. It's about healing not just for victims, but for everyone involved." He shuffled some papers, and everyone in the courtroom leaned forward, waiting for the ruling. "But before I render my judgment," Caprio continued, "I have a few more questions. For both of you." Judge Caprio removed his glasses and set them on the bench, a gesture that longtime observers of his courtroom knew signaled something significant was coming. He looked at Governor Harrington with an intensity that seemed to see past the expensive suit, past the political polish, past even the grief, to something deeper. "Governor, you've held public office for 30 years. You've shaped policy, made decisions that affected millions of lives. In all that time, how many funerals have you attended for people killed by reckless driving? How many families have you consoled? How many traffic safety initiatives have come across your desk? The governor was caught off guard by the question. I don't know exactly. Dozens, perhaps. Traffic safety has been a priority of several administrations. And yet, Caprio interrupted gently. When you got behind that wheel, when you ran those red lights, all that policy, all those initiatives, all those grieving families you met, none of that stopped you. The governor had no response. He simply lowered his head. I'm not trying to shame you, Governor. I'm trying to help you understand something. Judge Caprio's voice was filled with compassion. You see, I deal with traffic cases every day. Parking tickets, red lights, speeding. Most people think these are minor matters. But every ticket represents a moment when someone could have killed or been killed. Every violation is a potential tragedy that simply, by grace, didn't happen. He gestured toward Maria Santos. Mrs. Santos was lucky. You stopped in time. But luck isn't policy. Luck isn't what we should be relying on to keep our citizens safe. The governor looked up, and his expression had changed. There was something awakening in his eyes, not just guilt, but understanding. Your Honor, what would you have me do? Judge Caprio smiled that warm, gentle smile that had made him famous. Now that's a question worth asking. He leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Santos, I want to ask you something. You work 3 jobs, you said? Maria nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Cleaning, laundry, caregiving. And your daughter, your remaining child, she must be worried about you, working so hard. Tears sprang to Maria's eyes. She begs me to slow down. But the medical bills from Alejandro, the funeral costs, I'm still paying them off. And my daughter, she's trying to finish nursing school. She wants to complete what her brother started. But tuition keeps going up, and I can't. She stopped, overwhelmed. Judge Caprio turned to the governor. Governor Harrington, I have an unusual question for you, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Not as a politician trying to generate good press, but as a human being trying to do the right thing. The governor straightened, attentive. Mrs. Santos's son, Alejandro, wanted to be a nurse. Her daughter is continuing that dream. Meanwhile, your son Thomas was treated at Rhode Island Hospital, I imagine by dedicated nurses who provided compassionate care during his final days. Governor Harrington's breath caught. The nurses they were angels. They treated Thomas with such dignity. They treated our whole family with kindness. Then here's my question, Caprio continued. Is there something you could do, not because this court orders you to, not for political gain, but simply because it's right, something that might help Mrs. Santos and honor the memory of both Thomas and Alejandro? Well, the courtroom was electric with anticipation. Attorney Carlucci looked uncomfortable. This was far outside any legal framework he understood. But the governor seemed to be thinking deeply, genuinely wrestling with the question. Finally, he spoke. Your Honor, I came into this courtroom thinking I was fighting a legal battle. I thought I was defending my position, my power. Instead, I found... He looked at Maria. I found a mirror. I found a mother who lost her son, just like I lost mine, who works 3 jobs while I live in a mansion, who has every reason to hate me, but instead showed me compassion I didn't deserve. He took a deep breath. Next month, we're announcing the state budget. There's a healthcare workforce initiative. I've been working on scholarships for nursing students from underserved communities. It's been struggling for funding because of budget constraints. He paused. My wife and I have a family foundation. We've been discussing what to do with it since Thomas passed. He was actually going to take it over someday. What if we created a scholarship in Thomas's name? The Thomas Harrington Memorial Nursing Scholarship. And what if the first recipient was Maria Santos's daughter? Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Maria's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Not just tuition, the governor continued, his voice growing stronger. Books, living expenses, whatever she needs to finish her degree. And we could expand it, fund more scholarships for students like her, students who are working multiple jobs, students who are carrying on the dreams of family members who never got the chance. Judge Caprio's eyes were shining. Governor, that's a beautiful gesture. But I want to be clear about something. His voice took on a serious tone. This cannot be and will not be interpreted as an attempt to buy your way out of consequences. Do you understand that? I understand, Your Honor. And I don't want it to be that. I want it to be separate. Whatever you decide about these violations, I'll accept. The fines, the points on my license, whatever you determine is just. This scholarship, this is about something else. This is about two families who lost sons, finding a way to honor them together. Maria Santos stepped forward, her face a complex tapestry of emotions. Governor, she said, her voice trembling, my daughter's name is Elena. She's 23 years old. She works at the laundromat with me when she's not in class. She's brilliant and kind, and she's going to be an amazing nurse someday. She paused. Are you really offering to help her? Governor Harrington stepped away from the defendant's microphone and approached Maria. For a moment, the two simply stood face to face, two grieving parents, two human beings who had found each other in the most unlikely of places. Mrs. Santos, he said when Thomas was sick, I couldn't save him. No amount of money, no amount of power could save him. I've never felt more helpless in my life. But maybe, his voice cracked, maybe some good can come from this. Maybe Thomas's legacy can be helping other people become the nurses who cared for him. And maybe Alejandro's legacy can live on through his sister. He extended his hand. Maria looked at it for a long moment. Then, to the amazement of everyone in the courtroom, she ignored his hand and pulled him into a hug. The governor, the powerful, distant, political figure who had arrived demanding special treatment, stood in the middle of the Providence Municipal Courtroom, sobbing in the arms of a cleaning woman. Judge Caprio watched the scene with tears rolling freely down his cheeks. In all his decades on the bench, he had witnessed thousands of moments of human connection. But this was something special. You know, he said softly, almost to himself, this is why I do this job. After several moments, Governor Harrington and Maria Santos separated, both wiping their eyes. The courtroom remained hushed, reverent, as if everyone understood they had witnessed something sacred. Judge Caprio allowed the silence to settle before he spoke. Please, if you would both return to your positions. I'm ready to render my judgment. The governor returned to the defendant's microphone. Maria stepped to the side, but remained at the front of the courtroom, her photograph of Alejandro still clasped in her hands. Judge Caprio looked out at the packed gallery at the law students who had come to learn about procedure but were now learning about humanity, at the regular attendees who had seen hundreds of cases but would remember this one forever, at the court officers struggling to maintain their professional composure. "What happened in this courtroom today," he began, "is a reminder of what the law is supposed to do. Not just punish, but transform. Not just extract penalties, but inspire reflection. Not just enforce rules, but serve justice, and true justice is always connected to our shared humanity." He turned to Governor Harrington. "Governor, when you entered this courtroom, you made a grave error. You suggested that your position placed you above the law that governs every citizen of this state. I want to be absolutely clear. No one is above the law. Not you. Not me. Not the wealthiest businessman or the most powerful politician. The moment we start believing otherwise is the moment our democracy begins to fail." The governor nodded solemnly. "I understand, Your Honor, and I apologize not just to this court, but to every citizen of Rhode Island who expects their leaders to be held to the same standards as everyone else." "That apology is meaningful," Caprio acknowledged. "And what's more meaningful is what happened after. You listened. You reflected. You allowed yourself to be vulnerable in a way that I suspect is very difficult for you. And you responded to Mrs. Santos's story, not with defensiveness, but with compassion and action." He shuffled through his papers. "Now, for the matter of the violations. 3 red light camera violations at $150 each. 1 failure to yield to a pedestrian at $200. Total fines, $650. He looked up. "I could waive these fines. Given the circumstances, your son's illness, your grief, there would be precedent for that. Many judges would do exactly that." The courtroom held its breath. "But I'm not going to do that." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Attorney Carlucci shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not going to waive them because you don't need me to," Caprio continued. "And more importantly, because waiving them would send the wrong message. You have the means to pay these fines without hardship. And paying them, accepting the same consequences any other citizen would face, is itself a powerful statement about equality before the law." Governor Harrington nodded. "I agree completely, Your Honor." "Good. The fines stand as charged. $650, payable within 30 days. But Caprio wasn't finished. "However, I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to make a request, not an order, but a request that goes beyond this case." He leaned forward. "Governor, you have power. Real power. The power to shape policy, to allocate resources, to change lives on a scale most of us can only imagine. I'm asking you to use that power wisely. This scholarship you've proposed, make it real. Make it substantial. Make it something that will help not just Elena Santos, but dozens, maybe hundreds of students like her over the years to come. And one more thing. The next time traffic safety legislation comes across your desk, the next time someone proposes red light cameras or crosswalk enforcement or any of the measures that sometimes seem like bureaucratic inconveniences, I want you to remember today. Remember Maria Santos. Remember what almost happened. And remember that every single traffic law, every single safety measure exists to prevent tragedies like the one that took Alejandro. The governor's voice was thick with emotion when he responded, "Your Honor, I promise you, I will never forget this day, and those policies will have my full support." Judge Caprio smiled, that warm, grandfatherly smile. "I believe you will, Governor." He turned to Maria. "Mrs. Santos, I want to thank you again. You came here in anger and left something far more valuable: forgiveness, understanding, and a connection that may change both of your lives." Maria nodded, tears still glistening on her cheeks. "Thank you, Your Honor, for listening, for making space for my story. Most courts—" She hesitated. "Most courts wouldn't have let me speak." "This isn't most courts," Caprio replied gently. "This is Providence Municipal Court, and every voice matters here." He picked up his gavel, then paused, looking out at the gallery one final time. "Let me leave everyone with this thought. Today we saw something remarkable. We saw a powerful man learn humility. We saw a grieving woman choose compassion over bitterness. We saw strangers, united by loss, find a way to create hope. This is what court should be. Not just a place of punishment, but a place of transformation." He held up the gavel. "The law is not just words on paper. It's a living commitment we make to each other to treat every person with dignity, to hold each other accountable, and to believe that people can change, can grow, can become better." He brought the gavel down. "Governor Harrington, this case is concluded. Pay the clerk on your way out." "And Governor?" He paused until the governor met his eyes. "Go be the leader your son believed you could be. Go prove that power and compassion aren't opposites, that the strongest thing a person can do is acknowledge their weaknesses and commit to doing better." Governor Harrington approached the bench and extended his hand. Judge Caprio shook it warmly. "Thank you, Your Honor, for not letting me get away with being less than I should be. That's what we're here for, Governor. All of us. Every day. Helping each other be a little bit better than we were the day before." As Governor Harrington walked out of the courtroom, stopping to exchange contact information with Maria Santos, promising to meet her daughter, wiping his eyes, the gallery broke into spontaneous applause. Judge Caprio didn't stop them. Some moments deserved to be celebrated. Later that evening, the video of the hearing would be uploaded to YouTube. Within a week, it would have 50 million views. Within a month, the Thomas Harrington Memorial Nursing Scholarship would be fully funded, and Elena Santos would become its first recipient. Within a year, Governor Harrington would sign the most comprehensive traffic safety bill in Rhode Island history, standing at the ceremony next to Maria Santos, both of them holding photographs of their sons. And in Providence Municipal Court, Judge Frank Caprio would continue doing what he had always done, not just hearing cases, but hearing people. Not just enforcing laws, but embodying justice, reminding everyone who entered his courtroom that the law, at its best, is simply love in action.